When Hurley and Chen left PayPal to form YouTube, they sought investment from Sequoia Capital. Sequoia Capital put in a series of investments over about a 9-month period, and then immediately that board at YouTube put the company up on the blocks. When YouTube was put on the blocks for sale, the first thing they did is we negotiated a standstill with all of those companies that had copyright infringement suits pending against YouTube. YouTube was a target for copyright infringement, but because they had no money, it was not worth suing them. Upon acquisition, though, all of those companies being Viacom, Disney, Google being one of them, a number of these companies had an interest in perhaps suing YouTube at the point where it was acquired. So as a part of the acquisition process, they immediately sought standstills for about a year or 2 years in some cases from all of those parties in exchange for the right to negotiate for the acquisition. Interestingly, it was probably a fait accompli that before that process began that Google was going to be the winning acquirer anyway, but nevertheless that's the way it played out. Google acquired the company for paid $1.65 billion for that company at the time of the acquisition. The difference in the market cap of Google on the day before versus the day after that acquisition was roughly $1.65 billion. So it was a company that they acquired for free. At the time, at the point that it was made, immediately thereafter, the Sequoia placement on the board of Google resigned, and the cycle has begun again in other places. So, point of the story is that these things are rarely a series of random events that take place that lead to the end of the story. These are things that are planned. These are things that have a beginning, a middle, and an end to them, these stories. And so as such, my encouragement to you as an early stage entrepreneur, for those that in the room that are fitted within that category, is to begin that thought process. Now, it doesn't require that you have inside board members, inside contacts and networks within the companies that you think might be appropriate acquirers for your company today. But what it does require you to do is to think through the process of how you might facilitate that acquisition when the time is right. First lesson in that regard that one needs to appreciate and understand is that the value of a company increases over time, but it doesn't do so in a linear fashion. Again, a common misconception is that as I put more effort and money into my company over time, every day it gets to be worth a little bit more. Every aspect of effort that I put in making improvements in my company and its product, its customers, makes it worth more to a potential acquirer every day. No. Value increases in sort of a step function. Value goes up significantly. It spikes upward at discrete events over the course of a company's history, and over the course of the spaces in between those discrete events, some of which I've listed here for examples, the purposes of example. In between those, on the run in between the rise on that staircase, no change to the valuation takes place. So what's the implication of that? The implication of that is that when planning an exit, when thinking about an exit, one needs to plan how. I mean, in the case of the diagram I've selected here, we've got an even rise and run over the course of the history of that company. That's not the case at all, as you can imagine. There are periods where you will go a long time burying more and more money into your company before you're going to reach that next discrete event that's going to jump it upward in value. So thought needs to be made in terms of selecting the right timing for an exit as to whether it's worth taking that next long run to get to the next rise. Okay? So timing is important in that regard. The next point is to say that the nature or the motivation for an acquisition needs to be as much as possible oriented toward strategic value and away from financial value. One of the things that in our firm that we try to practice as much as we can is to marry up acquirees and acquirers in a fashion where the combined entity is more than what the two sets of financial statements might derive or show. You want to make sure that the value that's perceived by the acquiring company of your company is something more than it would be able to do if they were able to simply reproduce that themselves or and try and accelerate that. Just a rule of thumb, and something that bears out in our experience, is that the difference between the between the acquisition price paid for a company on the basis of strategic value, meaning that I think I need that company or that product line inside of mine in order to be competitive in the future, or I think I need that business model to complement the one that I've already employed in my, or that's a geography that those guys have exploited fully that I have been unable to break into. I need to get into that geography right away. 50% is generally the increase in value that's between something that's done on the basis of that kind of thinking versus the kind of thinking which is, well, if I take a look at how much these guys are going to make over the course of the next 5 years, I do a present value analysis, I bring that back, and I'm willing to pay some number less than that because that's the value I want to see in this company. Over 50% difference between that financial analysis and the more greed-based, emotional-based investing that would go on the basis of strategic value. So you want to build strategic value wherever you can and not financial value. So what does the plan mean from the start? So at the risk of sucking all the glamour out of the M&A process, it's effectively a sales and marketing challenge. Except what you're selling is not the product that the company offers, but rather the company itself. And part of that is what the company has to offer from a product perspective, but part of it as well is what else that the company has. So the company might have tax losses that are able to be applied to the acquiring company, as an example, that are outside the value that it has simply on the basis of its product. But nevertheless, the important thing that needs to be done is you need to understand the customer or the potential acquirers that might be out there for your company and their motivations. Do they have gaps in their product line? Do they have gaps in their geographies? Do they have gaps in their business models that your company might be able to fill if acquired? And if the answer is yes, then you need to orient your efforts in order to optimize that acquisition. You need to orient your company and its offerings toward those gaps, right? You want to fill that need that customer has, which is different perhaps than the needs that your actual customers have. You have to design your business to fit. I think I've given you an overview of that. And you also have to make it easy to exit. Now this is a common complaint, criticism, and problem with any acquisition. If a company has not paid close attention to how it's structured, right? Your cap table isn't clean, and by that I mean ideally you have one set of shares, one class of shares. Everybody's a common shareholder, right? And it's easy to understand. It's easy to make the calculations. It's easy to effect an acquisition in a clean structure like that. Whereas if it's complicated and the company's been running for 15 years and every time you've done a financing you've had to create a different class of share and each one of those shares has a different set of preferred rights over the right? Clean is better. The books have to be clean. So although it's a burden, although it doesn't seem within the boundaries of the real work that needs to be done in building your business, making sure that you have statements that may not have necessarily be audited but would be auditable, that are produced on a regular basis, that you've got the accounting, that you don't have there isn't a shoebox full of receipts sitting in a closet somewhere that's representative of the financial records of the. It has to be clean in that regard. That the intellectual property is clean. So perhaps there was a tech transfer out of the university, or perhaps the chief technology officer was formerly an employee of the university and may have had an idea at the time that he was in the bathroom down the hallway in his office that. You have to make sure that you've got sign-off in those cases and that intellectual property, the actual core value within your company is in fact and can be proven to be owned by your company. So that when somebody else comes along and wants to buy that, they don't have any issues that are hanging off the other end that they're worried about.